Hey there, Manhwa lovers! Today we're recapping a story called Husband Replacement. Please like this video and subscribe. It helps us a lot. With glittering jewelry, her lady was adorned and showered with praise. The maid said she would surely be the most beautiful woman at the ball tonight, while the butler added that the Duke would fall in love with her all over again. As they praised her, Alici Camedici, Duchess of the House of Camedici, looked into the mirror. She was indeed ravishing. Her lady chuckled softly, saying they had done well and that she was pleased. She reached for the ring box and asked if the Duke had departed. The maid replied that yes, he had already left and had given strict instructions for them to take good care of her since it was her first time going out as the Duchess. Alici froze. The butler quickly asked if she was all right, noticing how pale she had become. She clasped her hands together and said she was fine, though her thoughts raced. There was no way she could be nervous. She had been waiting for this very day. "Let's go," she said with fierce excitement, because if anything, she was far too thrilled to sit still. As she prepared to leave, she thought to herself that it was finally time to face those wretched people. At the ball, the nobles whispered among themselves. They spoke of how news of the cursed Duke's marriage had spread everywhere, and how the bride was said to be the adopted daughter of the Grandier family. "The adopted daughter?" one of them said. "Wasn't she taken in so suddenly?" Another agreed, adding that she would even be attending the ball tonight. They wondered how such a marriage could happen without a single rumor beforehand. Just then, a voice spoke from behind them. She climbed her way up, that's why. They all turned to see a red-haired lady speaking boldly. "Just think about it. Who in the right mind would fall in love with a man said to be cursed?" she asked. Esperad Camedici, a fine duke, yet every fiancé he ever had died mysteriously, one after another. On the other hand, there was the Duke of Grandier, a man old enough to have grandchildren who suddenly adopted a daughter, Alici Grandier, a girl no one had ever heard of. She had the title, but she came from nothing. If the curse claimed her life, no one important would be hurt, and the marriage would only raise the standing of the Grandier family. The red-haired lady listed the names of all the women who had died as the Duke's fiancés, each of them passing away barely a month after their engagement. Then she asked if they were not curious about what fate awaited the new Duchess, Alici Camedici. "How rude of you!" another voice cut in from behind. Everyone turned. The Duchess of Camedici had arrived. She stepped forward, her presence cold and commanding. She said she had no idea she was the center of such a passionate discussion. The red-haired lady chuckled and called out to her, saying she must be mistaken. Everyone, she claimed, was only curious about her. "Of course, we understand it may have sounded unpleasant, but no one here spoke out of malice," she added calmly. Alici let out a slow sigh and asked how it was possible to discuss whether she would live or die without even a trace of malice. In her heart, she thought that Jessica Bonaparte was still as shameless as ever. Jessica replied that they were only speaking out of concern, hoping that the curse plaguing the Duke would finally be lifted. Alici froze. As always, Jessica twisted her words, making Alici seem small-minded for speaking up. Jessica Bonaparte, heiress to the immensely wealthy Bonaparte family and the beloved darling of high society. She was someone Alici had always found frightening. Jessica had tormented her so badly in the past that Alici often cried alone in her empty room where no one could see her. Jessica looked surprised when Alici called her by her full name and asked how she knew it. Alici answered coldly that she had not come to play word games. She told them plainly that discussing someone's death while they were still alive was inappropriate. The fact that none of them showed even a hint of remorse made their true intent painfully clear. Jessica immediately grew angry. How dare an adopted nobody speak to her this way? She said firmly that she never meant it like that. She claimed she was only trying to clear up a misunderstanding and smooth things over, so how could Alici twist it into public humiliation? Alici's butler let out a quiet sigh. Alici looked Jessica straight in the eye and told her that it did not seem that way at all. In her heart, she knew she was done falling for her tricks. Even a 5-year-old knows how to apologize when they make a mistake, Alicia said, adding that the more Jessica spoke, the more pitiful she appeared in every way. She told her bluntly to admit her fault and apologize instead of staking her entire family's honor on it. At those words, Jessica's expression changed at once. The nobles began to murmur among themselves, whispering that the young lady had no choice but to apologize. Jessica clenched her fist as Alicia made it clear that refusing to apologize was the same as declaring war on the Belunci family. At that moment, the Duke made his entrance, and everyone turned toward him. Seeing the tension in the room, he asked how anyone could mock both the living and the dead, then refuse to apologize after insulting the Duke and the Duchess. Everyone was stunned. Esperad apologized to his lady for arriving late. "So this was the kind of conversation taking place in my absence?" he said calmly. Jessica bowed at once, greeting his grace and claiming there had been a misunderstanding, that none of it was meant that way. Esperad placed a hand on her lady's shoulder and said she did not owe him an apology. Instead, he was the one who owed his wife one. Alicia was surprised. Jessica, on the other hand, glared in frustration as all eyes turned to her. She had no choice. With the full wake of her family's name behind her, she apologized to the Duchess of Camedici. Alicia saw the pain and shame written clearly on her face and murmured to herself that letting her off so easily was almost laughable. But this was only the beginning. There would be much more to come. His Grace then turned back to his lady and apologized for leaving her alone for so long. She smiled and told him it was not his fault. Still, she said softly, that the earlier commotion had drawn everyone's attention to them. Deep down, she knew that even without it, they would have stood out all the same. Esperad reached for her hand and bowed in a gentlemanly manner, surprising her, as he politely asked for the honor of dancing with her. She smiled and placed her hand in his, thinking that he was being very considerate. As they danced, she could not stop thinking about how he was the only one who called her by that name, a name no one else used. She knew she would never forget the strange, stirring feeling for the rest of her life. The nobles watched in shock as the Duke and Duchess danced. They looked nothing like the rumors described. They moved as if they had been lovers for a long time. While dancing, the Duke told her softly that he would soon step out to seek an audience with His Majesty. If she felt uncomfortable, she should return to the mansion and rest. She told him that Lady Mars was already overworking herself, but His Grace replied that it was her duty to support her and reminded her that she was the lady of his house. Just as she was about to respond, a voice came from behind them saying they had just arrived and had not yet had the chance to greet them. "Duchess of Camedici," the voice called. Alicia froze. She turned at once, her heart tightening. The voice sounded familiar. "Madam," a yellow-haired man stepped forward. She glared at him coldly, thinking to herself that of all places, it had to be here. He asked if she was all right, but she sighed and said she felt a bit faint. He lifted her hand and kissed it, telling her to remember his name, Joseph, the eldest son of the Count of Bonaparte. Her eyes darkened. She thought she would never forget his filthy name. She had returned to this world for one reason: to destroy him. His name burned into her soul, impossible to erase. Joseph Bonaparte, the man who brought her nothing but misery. Her former husband, the one who killed her. If she had any sin at all, it was believing in someone she should never have trusted. Back then, she had run as fast as she could through the forest, her mind screaming with questions. Why did he do this to her? She tripped over a stone and fell to the ground, only for him to catch up to her. He mocked her, calling her a fool for thinking she could escape, saying she had led them to the perfect spot. "Joseph!" she cried out. He asked how she dared speak his name with her filthy mouth. She could not believe what she was hearing. She tried to run again, but he stabbed her. At that moment, she realized he had killed her while she was pregnant with his child. As her life faded, she thought about how she had always been ignored because of her origin. Even though she knew he didn't love her, she still trusted him as her husband. Why did he go this far? She swore she would never forgive him. He was a monster, and if she ever got another chance, she would take her revenge. Then she woke up. Confused, she sat up slowly and looked around. Just moments ago, she had been in the forest. Now she was in a room she knew well, the one she used in the Grandier ducal house. She wondered who had brought her here. Just then, a maid's voice came from outside, asking if she was awake. She answered yes and called for Greta to come in. Greta was the household maid. Hearing her lady call her by name, she asked in surprise if she had already introduced herself. Alici frowned and asked what she was talking about. Why was she being addressed as Miss instead of Madam? Had Greta forgotten that she was married? Alici suddenly froze. She placed her hand on her belly, and it was flat. Greta spoke sadly, saying she knew it must be hard for her. After all, she had lost her father and had come to the capital as the adopted daughter of the Duke. At that moment, Alici wondered what Greta was even talking about. More than that, she wondered why she was alive at all. She was supposed to be dead. Just moments ago, she had been stabbed by Joseph in the rain-soaked forest. She had cursed him with her last breath and closed her eyes in death. So how was she here? Greta called out to her in worry when she saw how quiet she had become. Before she knew it, Alici jumped down from the bed and rushed to the mirror. The sight before her made her heart stop. Staring back at her was her old self, her face from before the marriage. She wondered if she was dreaming. She grabbed the knife beside her and cut her finger, only to feel sharp pain. She was not dreaming. She had truly come back. 7 years back, to the time before she married Joseph. The maids soon began gossiping. They whispered about how the young lady had cut herself with a knife and kept insisting she was a married woman. They concluded that she must have lost her mind after her parents were beaten to death by loan sharks. They said she was lucky the Duke had saved her before she suffered the same fate. Some of them muttered that they felt uneasy serving someone like her, a mere country bumpkin. Just then, the head maid appeared and demanded to know what they were doing. The maids bowed at once. She warned them that if she ever saw such behavior again, they would be dismissed on the spot. Greta was the only one who visited her lady daily. She gently told her to be strong, saying she understood the pain of losing a father. Noticing how absent-minded Alici was, Greta begged her to pull herself together. She reminded her of the upcoming ball she was expected to attend and said the Duke was expecting nothing but perfection. Greta added that she must present herself properly and meet expectations, because only then would she be able to achieve what she wanted. That was when the thought struck her. If she stayed weak and powerless, she would marry that monster again and live through the same hell. She touched her belly, thinking of how she would lose her child and her life once more. This was her chance, a gift from heaven. She immediately told Greta to call for the tailor. Her goal was clear now, revenge for herself and for her child, and to do that, she had to debut at the upcoming ball. She spoke with fierce resolve, saying she would become the perfect lady of House Grandier and would not disgrace the Duke. Most of all, she knew she had to avoid the engagement to Joseph at all costs. In her past life, the engagement to the Bonaparte family had begun soon after she became the Duke's ward. To stop that from happening, she needed to earn her adoptive father's trust at the ball. Only then might she gain the chance to appeal to him. On the day of the ball, the Duke stood beside her as she stepped down from the carriage. As he looked at her, he thought about how unsure he had been given her condition when she first arrived in the capital. As they entered the hall, he reminded her to make sure she did not make any mistakes. Almost immediately, a noble approached the Duke, and they exchanged greetings. Before the Duke could even speak to Alici, she bowed politely to the noble, just as a proper lady should. Seeing her flawless manners, the Duke could not help but think that she was not bad at all for someone from the countryside. Reassured, he told her he would go greet other nobles and left her alone, confident she would not cause trouble. As soon as he left, Alici began to hear whispers. People spoke about her being the adopted daughter of the Grandier family. They said all kinds of things to belittle her, proudly claiming she would disgrace the family. She heard every word, yet she did not respond. She only glanced at them one by one. Alici was surprised. Words like these used to terrify her. Now she wondered why she had ever been scared. Just then, her eyes widened when she noticed a man in the crowd. Esperad Camedici, the young heir of the Camedici duchy, known for rarely appearing in social gatherings. In her previous life, they had never even exchanged greetings, but one thing was certain: she knew his future. As she approached him, she felt something strange, as if he did not feel unfamiliar at all. Seeing a young lady suddenly approach, Esperad was surprised. He let out a quiet sigh and looked away. Alici felt an odd emptiness, as though she was forgetting something important, yet she could not remember what it was. Deciding she needed fresh air, she headed outside. On the way, she bumped into someone, a pale-looking young lady. Alici quickly apologized and asked if she was all right. The girl calmly said she was fine and then hurried away. Alici noticed that the girl did not look well, but she brushed it off. She thought about how she had spent 7 years in high society and had never seen that man before. Still, if he was a guest from Count Garavon's household, she should remember him. Then it struck her. The Count's son-in-law was supposed to be at this ball. At that moment, she saw Esperad drinking with the Count's eldest son. Her eyes widened in shock. The pale young lady she had just bumped into was Count Garavon's daughter, the one who had died mysteriously 7 years ago. She had been found dead in the lake. Before Alici could react, screams erupted. People shouted that the young lady was at the lake. Count Garavon was stunned. He demanded to know what they were talking about, then broke down in tears. His son tried to calm him, but it was no use. Standing quietly in a corner, Alici thought to herself that she had always known this day would come. Still, now that it had arrived, an uneasy feeling settled in her chest. Suddenly, the Count shouted, blaming everything on Esperad. He grabbed him by the collar and accused him of killing his daughter. Perhaps having someone to blame for his daughter's death would ease his grief, even if only a little. From that day on, Esperad Camedici became officially known as the Cursed Duke. All marriage talks surrounding the Camedici family came to a complete stop. Esperad himself refused to form ties with any family, as this was already the 3rd time his fiancée had died mysteriously. While the nobles whispered that Esperad was the problem, Alici knew they were wrong. He was not cursed. In fact, he was blessed. One day, he would become the King of Astel. Her eyes widened at the realization. If the Duke was not cursed, then this truth could be used to her advantage. The next morning, Gria helped her lady get dressed. She remarked that Alici seemed like a completely different person, praising her for finishing her etiquette lessons perfectly. Even the instructor had been impressed. Alici sighed and said that desperation had a way of changing people. In her heart, she thought that as a former countess, noble etiquette was nothing new to her. She was simply using her memories from her past life to create a better outcome this time. Greta smiled and said that desperation did not always lead to such a transformation. Alici thought bitterly that hers was the desperation of someone who had died and come back to life, something no one else could compare to. After she was dressed, she was informed that his lordship was waiting for her. Entering the dining room, she bowed and apologized for being late. His Grace said he had heard she completed her etiquette lessons far quicker than expected. She bowed again and credited it to the madam's excellent teaching. As soon as she sat down, he told her he would get straight to the point. In a few days, you will marry the second son of Count Bonaparte, he said. Godfrey Bonaparte. Alici's eyes widened in shock. His Grace told her she should be satisfied, as Godfrey's appearance was proper and society regarded him well. Alici thought to herself how she could never be satisfied. She knew the truth. Godfrey would later impregnate Jessica, and her marriage would be shifted to the eldest son, Joseph, the same man who despised having a wife of low status and would eventually kill her. The marriage talks were moving faster than she expected. She had to find a way out. Alici spoke up, saying she understood why the Bonaparte family was considering marriage with her despite her shortcomings. It was because the struggle between the conservatives and the progressives had grown too intense. His Grace wiped his mouth and said such matters were not for a young lady to concern herself with. Still, deep down, he was impressed that she had drawn such a conclusion from only a few hints. The Grandier ducal family had originally been neutral, but as the conflict between conservatives and progressives intensified, the neutral factions were forced to choose a side. The Bonaparte family, being conservative, was pressuring the Grandier household. Alici knew she was nothing more than a chess piece in their plan, but if she could align herself with a faction stronger than the Bonapartes, everything would change. As he looked at her, His Grace could not help but think that, although she came from the countryside, she was far sharper than he had expected. He told her they were done eating and that she should not overstep. She quickly apologized and said she wished to request his permission. Surprised, the Duke listened as she said she had acted discourteously toward Duke Camedici at the recent banquet and wished to offer a formal apology. Hearing this, His Grace thought about how bold she was. Approaching the cursed Duke was the same as announcing herself to the marriage market. If power was the concern, Duke Camedici did outrank the Bonapartes. After all, he carried royal blood. Yet after what happened with Count Garavon, no family wanted to arrange a marriage with him. Alici was an adopted daughter brought in to strengthen family ties, so His Grace wondered what her true purpose was. He asked her directly what she intended. He reminded her of the incident at the banquet, but she calmly said she only wished to apologize. She even told him that if misfortune should befall her, he could use Duke Camedici to pay the price. He understood her meaning at once. He had nothing to lose, and she was right. He already knew she was clever, but this exceeded his expectations. In the end, His Grace agreed and said he would prepare a carriage for her. At the Camedici ducal estate, Esperad received a letter from the Grandier family. It stated that Alici had come to offer a formal apology for her discourtesy toward him at the banquet. Esperad wondered if she was the same lady who had approached him there without saying a word. He knew there had been nothing between them that required an apology, and it troubled him even more that she had attended the Garavon family banquet at all. Just then, the butler announced her arrival. As soon as she entered, Esperad asked her to take a seat. She bowed and thanked him for allowing her visit on such short notice. "I finally greet you. I am Alici of the Grandier family," she introduced herself. Esperad introduced himself in return, as courtesy demanded. He told her he did not recall any discourtesy on her part, and asked what offense she was referring to. Alici replied that the discourtesy she spoke of was not from the banquet, but from today. Confused, he asked what she meant. She bowed her head and asked him to forgive her for lying in order to meet him. Then, with steady resolve, she said her true reason for coming was to propose marriage to him. The room fell completely silent. When Esperad finally spoke, his voice was cold. He asked if she was mocking him. Alici looked at him seriously and said neither this nor her words were a joke. Though it might seem improper, she, Alici of the Grandier family, was formally asking for his hand in marriage. This is really getting interesting. Seeing a woman propose marriage to men is another different kind of feeling. Sitting across from him, sharing the same space, Alici could clearly see his unwavering eyes. They were nothing like Joseph's murky red ones. Being so close to him, she felt it deeply. This man was born to be a king. Esperad smiled faintly and said he had not known the Duke of Grandier was such a creepy man. Alici was confused as he asked whether she thought he could not see the advantage in aligning with the conservative faction. She interrupted him at once, insisting that was not the reason and begging him to hear her out. But Esperad had no intention of listening. He told her to go back and tell her adoptive father that he felt insulted for being sent here, especially after what happened at the banquet. Turning away, he prepared to leave. Alici tried to explain her proposal was genuine, but he refused to listen. When she tried to stop him, he warned her sharply. If she continued with this deception, the Duke of Grandier would be better off searching for a new foster daughter. "The kindness I've shown you ends here," he said. Alici felt shattered. She knew that if she lost him like this, she would end up with Joseph. No matter what it took, she had to make Esperad hers, or she would be dragged back into that hell. She rushed forward and grabbed his arm before he could leave the room. Esperad stopped in shock and demanded to know what she was doing. Alici begged him to listen to her, saying that after that he could reject her completely. He told her to let go, remarking that she seemed to have no fear of death at all. She looked straight at him and said the reason she wanted to marry him was because he was not cursed. Esperad stared at her and asked what on earth she was talking about. Alici knew this was her only chance to explain. If she spoke properly, he would understand. One thing was certain, she would marry him. They both returned to their seats. Alici told him he might not believe it, but he was not cursed. Esperad asked how she could be so certain. "How can you claim certainty over something even I am not sure of?" he asked. She sighed and said none of it truly made sense. There was no curse. Instead, someone was deliberately trying to stop his marriages. She said that he himself must have had his suspicions, but chose to stay silent so no one else would get hurt. Esperad sighed quietly. She had seen through everything. Then he asked why she would risk her life to propose to a man she had never truly met. Alici knew she could not tell him the real reason, that he would one day become king. He would never believe her. Instead, she told him the truth she could offer. She said she could not accept the man chosen for her political marriage. Esperad was stunned. He could not believe she was risking her life for such a reason. Alici explained that once she married, she would be bound to that man until death. She would rather die than marry him. She added that he would not lose face since she came from humble origins, even if she now belonged to the Grandier family. Esperad covered his face, shaken, and told her she could die. He said that Violetta had also done everything she could, yet he still failed to protect her. Alici replied firmly that she would do whatever it took to make sure such a tragedy never happened again. "You may try, but effort alone will not be enough," he said. "That is all I need," she answered. She declared that she would die, but not now and not like this. She would escape the unwanted marriage, and he would use her to uncover the one behind all of this. Hearing her words, Esperad could only think that her desperation was too real to be a lie. She was putting everything on the line. Alici added that if she died, she was only a foster daughter. It wouldn't damage the ties between families. Esperad sighed and said he was not concerned about political ties at all. No matter the situation, her safety should come first. Alici was surprised. She had not expected him to worry about her. Why wouldn't he be? "My dear, he's bound to be worried." Alici told him to trust her, because she believed she would not die. He asked why she was so confident. She looked at him proudly and said that if he stood by her side, she believed he would always be watching over her. So what did she have to fear? As soon as her lady left in his carriage, Esperad stood by the window, deep in thought. It was the first time anyone had ever told him he was not cursed. Back at the Grandier ducal estate, His Grace asked her what had truly happened during her visit. Why had Duke Camedici sent a marriage proposal immediately after? Alici replied that nothing special had been discussed. She said forming a strong alliance with the Camedici family would bring more benefit than aligning with House Bonaparte. He hummed thoughtfully and accepted the invitation, saying he would do as she wished. Then he looked at her closely. "But tell me," he said, "why would you choose the Duke of Camedici?" She was about to repeat that it was for the family's sake, but he stopped her and told her to speak honestly. Why would she risk everything for a man branded as cursed? Hearing that, Alici thought to herself that she had never seen it as a risk. She searched for the right words. "It was love at first sight," she said. His Grace was clearly surprised. Love at first sight with the Duke of Camedici? He smiled and called out, asking if His Highness was aware of this. Alici was stunned when Esperad appeared from behind, saying they had already shared quite a lot between them. This is so hilarious. So Esperad heard her saying it was love at first sight. After sitting down, Esperad stated that since both families were now in agreement, the marriage should be arranged as quickly and as secretly as possible. He glanced at Alici and added that this was for her protection. As he looked at her, it was hard to believe she was the same bold woman who had proposed to him. Her calm, businesslike manner did not match someone who had confessed love at first sight. Still, one thing was certain. She was a very intriguing woman. Watching the two of them, Duke Grandier could not help feeling confused. He could not understand what exactly they had shared between themselves. Soon, the wedding day arrived. Only a few people were present: the Duke, Alici's adopted father, and Esperad's escort knight, Edgar Billion. Even the priest was shocked to see such a quiet wedding with only 2 witnesses, but he carried on nonetheless. He asked Esperad if he accepted Alici as his partner, and he answered yes. The same question was given to her, and she accepted him as well, thinking to herself that this was her second vow. The priest sealed their union before the divine. Alici wondered if the eyes of the divine were truly watching them. If so, was her painful past also the will of the divine? And what about her burning desire for revenge now? Was that also fate? Esperad suddenly asked if she regretted it. He told her it was not too late to turn back, that she could still refuse the vow. At that moment, she realized something clearly. This man must have been treated badly and rejected too many times. Why else would he say such a thing on their wedding day? "If I didn't marry you," she said firmly, "I think I would regret it. I'm your wife now." They sealed their union with a kiss. As their lips met, she could not help thinking how different he was from Joseph. He treated her with such natural respect. When they returned to the mansion, Esperad told her it was the first time they had spoken alone since that day. He offered his hand and said he would escort her to her room. Alici was surprised and asked if there was a problem, adding that she thought he would be busy with work. "I'm not so busy that I can't spare time on my wedding day," he replied, calling her by her name. She was surprised once more. Esperad told her that now that they were married, he wished to stop using formal titles. If she felt uncomfortable, he would return to them. Alici smiled and said she did not mind at all. In her heart, she felt a quiet sadness. She had always been called Madame, Miss Grandier, or Madame Bonaparte. No one had ever called her by her name. Now, her husband wanted to call her Alici. She held back a happy smile and said, "I think I like it, Esperad." He was taken aback by her smile. She asked if he was comfortable with her calling him by his name as well. He smiled in return and said he was glad to hear it. As his cheeks turned red, Esperad thought to himself that Alici was shining. "I love this guy already. At this point, I wouldn't say this is a contract marriage. They're really so sweet towards each other." Alici was surprised when he led her to the bedroom. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring. She could hardly believe they would be sharing a room. When she had married Joseph, they never did. She had been given a small room no larger than the maid's quarters. Back then, she had forced herself to believe it was normal, but deep down, she had always known it wasn't. Esperad called her attention back to him. "This will be our room from today onward," he said gently. "Since it's our bedroom, I thought we should open it together." This man is really so sweet. They joined hands and opened the doors together. Alici's eyes widened in shock. The bed was enormous, draped in fine fabrics, and the room shimmered softly under the light. Everything from the curtains to the furniture looked elegant and warm. She couldn't stop herself. "Wow," she breathed. She turned to him immediately, excitement written all over her face. "It's so beautiful." Relief crossed Esperad's expression. He admitted that he had worried it might feel lacking since everything had been arranged so quickly. Alici laughed softly and shook her head. "It's perfect." Afterward, Esperad suggested they tour the estate before nightfall. As they turned to leave, Alici hesitated, then called out to him. "Esperad, could you help me with something?" He asked what it was, and instead of answering, she turned her back to him and lifted her hair, exposing the buttons of her dress. "Could you help me take this off?" His reaction was immediate. His entire face flushed. He stammered, clearly flustered. You mean the wedding dress?" She glanced at him, puzzled. "Yes." As he reached for the buttons, his heart pounded. He had never thought deeply about marriage before, but if this was also part of a husband's duty, then he would gladly do it. He undid the first button. Then he froze. "What's wrong?" she asked. "There's a scar," he said quietly. "It looks like a sword wound." She glanced back calmly. "Oh, that? I probably got it while playing around as a child. You can continue." Though uncertain, he did as she asked. When he reached the final button, the dress slipped down and Esperad panicked, immediately turning away. Alici smiled at his reaction and thanked him sincerely. Wait, did he think she'd be uncovered after the clothes fell? "I'll go change as well," he said quickly, retreating. In his mind, he admitted he was genuinely afraid there would be nothing underneath. "I'll wait for you," she said softly as he left. Once she was alone, Alici's expression darkened. She touched the scar on her back. It can only be Joseph's blade. That must have been when it happened, but it's strange how her 18-year-old body still bears wounds from the life she died. She knew she would have to keep covering it with makeup, as she always did. Soon after, she and His Grace resumed their tour of the mansion. She praised how immaculate everything was and asked who managed such a beautiful estate. Esperad told her she would soon meet Benjamin and Madame Marseille. Despite herself, Alici worried the walk might feel awkward. They were newly married, after all, but Esperad guided her with ease, never rushing her, never making her uncomfortable. Then he stopped. "This way," he said. He led her to a door and explained that only 3 people had access to the room behind it, himself as head of the house, and Benjamin and Madame Marseille, but he's adding her now. He opened the door. "Let me introduce you to the secret room of the Camedici Duchy." Inside, Alici gasped. The family tree covered the wall, carefully preserved, tracing generations tied closely to royalty. Her name was there, written among nobles and royalty alike. In this country, Estelle, even if royalty received a title, it wasn't hereditary. Royalty without titles were nothing but empty shells, holding only bloodline, and nobles avoided marrying them. However, the previous Camedici Duke had received the king's recognition and passed down his title, so Esperad had both bloodline and rank. With everything, status, bloodline, and a good reputation in society, he was a rising groom candidate in social circles, despite countless rumors. Esperad explained to his lady that his father was the youngest brother of the late King Ludwig II, making him close in age to the late king's 2 sons, King Briam III, and close friends with Count Merck. Their closeness sparked interesting stories within the palace. Alici smiled, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "The first thing that comes to mind is about my mother. His Majesty the former king, the late king, and Count Merck were all worried about my father's bride," he said, explaining how the 3 could never agree on who my father should marry. So his father remained unmarried even past the usual marriageable age. Then one day his father attended a ball in the kingdom of Descartes and fell in love with Princess Rihanna. Most royalty had no objections, after all she was a princess, making her a suitable match. The marriage seemed certain to proceed, until Count Merck strongly opposed. Alici's eyes widened in surprise. Esperad explained that it wasn't just that they were the same age, but that his father and Count Merck got along so well because their preferences matched. Count Merck had fallen for her at first sight, too. Both men proposed to her at the same time, and his mother requested a duel to test their strength. The fight was fierce, and their supposed close friendship turned out to be a lie. It's crazy. His mother ruined the friendship of 2 best friends. Who even duels over a woman? Alici concluded that his father must have won. Esperad smiled, confirming that was true. They held their wedding just a month later. He told her it was an exceptionally fast development, even breaking the record by marrying in just 1 week. Alici could barely find words. Looking at the family tree, he told her that the room had now become a place for the 2 of them. Alici smiled, thinking to herself that he genuinely considered her a member of the ducal family. She thanked him, and he smiled, saying it was only natural. Looking at her face, he wondered what kind of sadness she carried to make such a pitiful expression. Finally, Madame Marseille came over and introduced herself to the new Duchess. Alici was glad and asked for her guidance, admitting she was still inexperienced. Madame Marseille placed a cup of tea on the table, explaining it would help relieve tension for both master and mistress. Alici was surprised when she left and picked up the tea, realizing the woman was creating a space for them. She appreciated the quiet moment to gather her thoughts. Though her marriage to Esperad was technically a contract, he treated her like a real wife, and she was grateful for his kindness. Suddenly, a thought froze her. What if he wanted a deeper relationship as a married couple? Just then, she heard him call her name. She turned to see him emerging from the shower, broad chest uncovered, water dripping down, looking impossibly attractive. He asked if she had waited too long, and she stammered, unable to reply. Seeing her confusion, he called again, but her mind raced with one thought. Could this be their first night together? If it happens, then their relationship will truly be real, right? I hope it does. "Are we going to do it?" she asked nervously, leaving him shocked. The room fell silent. He couldn't immediately find words, wondering what she meant, but resolved he would do whatever she wished. Her lady intervened, clarifying, and Alici realized she had overreacted. He wasn't thinking in that way, yet her imagination had run wild. "Shall we go to sleep? We're both tired, after all," she suggested, avoiding eye contact. He smiled, agreeing. Muttering to himself, he realized he had overthought things. Alici glanced at the teacup and recalled Madame Marseille's words about relaxation. She immediately understood why the woman had stepped out, to give them space. Sitting on the bed, she listened as he suggested leaving a light on. She asked if he usually slept with the lights off, and he explained he worried she might wake in the middle of the night and bump into something. Alici smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. He smiled back, saying he was simply doing what anyone would do. As she laid down, she reflected on his words. Back then, it had never felt like this. She closed her eyes, thinking, this is what it feels like to be cared for. She knew it would be a pleasant night, but when she dozed off, she found herself in another realm. Suddenly, she heard a baby cry. Following the sound, she felt blood splash her face and woke up to see Esperad fighting assassins. He turned to her, worry etched on his face, asking if she was hurt. She could barely respond, nausea rising at the scent of blood. It reminded her of the time she'd been stabbed. Esperad rushed to her side, ensuring she was safe. She asked who the attackers were, and he explained they appeared to be assassins. Alici concluded they must have been targeting her. He cautioned that it wasn't confirmed. She reasoned it was likely. They hadn't feared coming, knowing the couple would be together. She noted that the threat already made itself felt in their marriage. While discussing the situation, her eyes fell on the teacup, which had changed. Esperad said the assassins must have been shocked. Despite rumors of being cursed, he'd still married in secret. Alici stated confidently that the deaths were not his fault. He sighed, admitting it was because he had failed to protect them. He grabbed her hair gently, inhaling its scent, telling her how relieved he was to shield her from death. He suggested they move from the room immediately. Alici told him she knew it would be a hassle, but thought it better to change rooms daily, since assassins often memorize their target's room before striking. I doubt that's the case. There must surely be an informant in this estate. Esperad agreed it was a smart idea. Before she could protest, he lifted her into his arms, even as she insisted she was fine. Carrying her carefully, he said he wouldn't allow her to step on the filthy blood any longer. She held on to him, thanking him softly, and he noticed how much she trembled. A thought crossed his mind. It would be nice if she could lean on him at times like this. The next morning, Alici sat by the window, gazing out quietly. Esperad's care and attention overwhelmed her, and each gesture reminded her of her past life, dragging her heart down. Just then, Madame Marseille announced her entrance. Alici invited her. Madame Marseille entered, her expression full of concern. "Are you all right? Feeling unwell?" she asked. Alici smiled, reassuring her. "The estimate's swordsmanship is exceptional. I didn't suffer a scratch." Relieved, Madame Marseille sighed, but Alici had summoned her for questions. "When did you first hear about the Graces' marriage?" she asked. Marseille replied it had been a week ago. Alici continued, asking when the bedroom location was finalized. Marseille said 4 days ago. Alici concluded that the servants must have learned about it then, and that someone had likely gathered information in advance before the attack. "Are you saying you suspect the household staff?" Marcel asked, alarmed. Alici's gaze was sharp. "There's no way an attack could happen without insider information of the layout. Even if someone claims the information was leaked, it doesn't change the facts." Madame Marcel's voice rose. "The entire staff of this estate aren't outsiders. They come from generations of previous servants." Is this maid trying to argue with her lady that there can't be a bad fruit from a lineage? That's impossible. Alici's voice cut through calmly but firmly. "Are you literally saying assassins were able to scout the entire estate in that short time? Even the station guards noticed nothing and none were harmed." Marcel had no answer. Alici instructed her immediately to bring the full list of servants, including all details and family backgrounds. Slamming the table, she demanded the information delivered today. Marcel called out, trying to protest, but Alici glared. "Instead of raising your voice at the lady of the house you serve, get moving. You'll be busy with those findings." Shocked, Marcel bowed and left without hesitation. Alici exhaled, relieved, thinking to herself, if she's trembling over something like this, it's obvious she won't even manage revenge on Joseph with this mindset. She stood, checked the cardboard, and confirmed the cup of tea from last night was safely kept. Meanwhile, Esperad left the estate, pondering the assassin's movements from the night before. Their precision suggested the mansion had been surveyed thoroughly in advance. With tensions between the progressive and conservative factions, he realized there was more than enough motive to send an assassin. He concluded that someone who wasn't a Camedici but knew the family well must be behind it, and the only person who came to mind was Count Mirk. It makes sense. His father had taken away the woman Mirk loved. That enmity might be on his mind. At Count Mirk's estate, Joseph Bonaparte, eldest son of the conservative Bonaparte family, had paid a visit. As he prepared to leave, Count Mirk instructed him to send his regards to his father. Joseph left promptly. Mirk sighed, thinking to himself, Joseph only has a handsome face, nothing more. The Count of Bonaparte completely failed in raising an heir. At least the second son, Godfrey, shows more promise. Just then, a message arrived. The Duke of Grandier had arrived. I feel there's a possibility of Joseph and Esperad running into each other. "Brother!" Esperad shouted as he entered, and once he sat, both exchanged pleasantries. Mirk mentioned he had heard about Esperad's marriage a few days ago, and admitted it came as quite a surprise, considering it hadn't even been a month since the Garavan incident. His Grace smiled and said he had met a wonderful woman and didn't see the need to wait. "I have something to ask you," Esperad said, and the Count nodded for him to continue. He asked how it had been 26 days since His Majesty lost consciousness, yet no one had spoken of it. Count Mirk froze immediately at the question. The current king of Astelhort, despite his youth, was so frail and constantly ill, there was usually no need for secrecy. Count Mirk had long handled state affairs on his behalf, and everyone knew it. But if Mirk had kept the king's coma a secret, that changes everything. Esperad could tell that Mirk was hiding it to continue controlling the state and holding power as he is now. Talking about this now would definitely make Mirk angrier. Could it be that Count Mirk is hiding this because he knows that if the state discovered His Majesty's condition, they would appoint Esperad as the new king? Could it also be that he's preventing His Grace from marrying, all for that purpose? A lot of things are becoming fishy, and the head maid looks like a suspect.
This is where this part of the story ends. If you love this story and you want us to continue, please comment the protagonist's name, Alici.